ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमत्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणीश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणीश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रं यहमहमिति साक्षादात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामुच्चतव पवनचलनरोधात् आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. We will commence the Friday Atma Vichara by first listening to Bhagavan's Upadesha, and as usual we will be reading from the book Ramana Answers Self-Enquiry 1900 to 1950, a compilation of all the answers given by Bhagavan on the subject of Atma Vichara between 1900 to 1950. And the compilation has been done by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajanji. After contemplating on this week's question and answer and meditating on it by Bhagavan's grace, then we will have a 20 minutes Atma Vichara session, following which our president Shardaka would be talking about Atma Vichara as it has been contemplated in the book Ramana Gita, and then finally we will have the concluding prayers to Bhagavan. We have been looking at the question answers that have been put to Bhagavan between 1936 to 1950, and last couple of weeks we have been pondering on this question and answer by Bhagavan's grace. The question is, how is one to know the self? After reading that question, because the next questions are a continuation of the same, we will now this week look into the question number 37 and probably 38 if possible. So the devotee asks Bhagavan, how is one to know the self? Bhagavan very clearly says, knowing the self means being the self. Full stop. That is very clear. Bhagavan says, knowing the self is not like knowing any object, but verily being is the knowing. Bhagavan continues, can you say that you do not know the self? Though you cannot see your own eyes, and though not provided with a mirror to look in, do you deny the existence of your eyes? Similarly, you are aware of the self, even though the self is not objectified. When you say, I cannot know the self, It means absence in terms of relative knowledge, because you have been so accustomed to relative knowledge that you identify yourself with it. Such wrong identity has forged the difficulty of not knowing the obvious self, because it cannot be objectified. And you ask, how is one to know the self? Your difficulty is centered in how. Who is to know the self? Your duty is to be and not to be this or that. I am that I am sums up the whole truth. The method is summed up in be still. What does stillness mean? It means destroy yourself. Because any form or shape is the cause of trouble. Give up the notion that I am so and so. Our scriptures declare that it shines as I. So Bhagavan very clearly says to all of us here that knowing the self is verily being the self, and any other kind of knowing is all relative in nature, and it has been our long habit to know things, and therefore we want to, or long habit of relative knowledge, therefore we also expect the self to be relatively appearing to us in one form or the other, or in one way or the other, as an object of something, as an object of experience. So Bhagavan is saying that that's not the way it is. He gives an example of the eye. The eye cannot know the eye itself, or the eye, just because it cannot see itself, because there is no mirror or nothing else for it to see itself. Can we deny the eye is not present because it cannot see itself? No, it is verily through the eyes that we see, and therefore it establishes clearly that the I is present. So the I amness in us is present at all the times, even when we know or we don't know. Therefore, Bhagavan is saying it is only through that I am that we are experiencing everything. That pure awareness and pure presence is always there as the Shruti, as the fundamental, as the base. And just because we cannot see it as an object, can we deny I am not existing? Like the eye denying because it cannot see itself? No, it is only through the eyes we have seen everything. It is only through the presence and awareness that we know any other presence and any other thing we become aware. So Bhagavan is saying, therefore, I am that I am is the whole truth, and practically that can be experienced only by being still. Because there are not two things now, like the Triputis, the seer, seen, and the object of seeing, or the process of seeing. Since that is not possible here, the eyes, if it remains as it is experiencing itself. Like that, being still is the direct way of being in that I am. And for that to happen, we have to destroy this division, this first and foremost division which rises in the form of trying to know, trying to do, trying to acquire, trying to realize, and all of that. If that is destroyed, that means, what do we mean by destroyed? Do we take an axe and sword and cut it? We see that it is not the true knower, the true doer. The true knower, the true doer, or the true presence is always there as I am. When we recognize that, and when we remain in that as that, therefore being that I am is knowing the self. And Bhagavan says very clearly, the scriptures declare then that I am itself as shines as I continuously. And that is what is knowing self or being the self is. And further, Bhagavan is asked this question. So the devotee has understood now that non-self is the attention to the non-self is the problem. And therefore he asks, I want to eliminate the non-self so that the self may be realized. How shall I do it? What are the characteristics of the non-self? I repeat the question. I want to eliminate the non-self so that the self may be realized. How shall I do it? What are the characteristics of the non-self? To which Bhagavan puts a counter question. There is one who says that the non-self must be eliminated. Who is he? Question. What Bhagavan has done is, first of all, made the listener, the questioner, to go inward. If any answer is given, then the answering person, like in this conversation, the answering person like me, and the listening person like you, and the conversation that is happening, is still out making us outward turn. By putting a counter question, Bhagavan has removed this external triputis of the answerer and the answer and the knower. The three he has removed. And he has asked a question, who is this within you who wants to remove the non-self? Who is he? Now what happens? The external triputis are gone, but what may end up happening, we may have the internal triputis. Okay, I want to remove the non-self, so I'm there, and there is something called non-self, and so Bhagavan is asking, who is this person who wants to remove? Oh, so it is me, then who am I? So we may get out of the external triputis, but we may still have this internal dialogue many times, where we still have a thought as the answer, which is in this role play we may say that is the object, and the interpretation of the thought as the process of understanding, and then there is the knower of that thought. Still the triputi is, still the relative expectation is. Therefore, Bhagavan is asking to question the very source of the person who wants to know how to eliminate the self. So he is taking us, he is removing the object and the process of removing or understanding the object, and he is taking it to the core subject, the one who wanted to eliminate, and asking him to inquire about himself. Who am I? Or who is this? When we read, who is this I who wants to eliminate the non-self? And when we do that and further dive to see who that is, then we have taken that entity, that subject which was outward turned, inward towards the source of it. And when we do that, then and there, it has merged in the source, in that I am. And there is no answer. Again, if there is an answer, we have to recognize that there is an answer is the object, and the very process of answering is there, and the one who is trying to understand is there. So again, the triputis have come. Bhagavan has removed one set of external triputis, and is asking us to further remove all the internal triputis. And when we do that repeatedly, we see that the answer to whom is this or who am I, any answer, we are going back into the realm of the triputis. we are going back into that dealing with the subject, object, and the process of knowing. And that verily Bhagavan wants to eliminate. He wants us to go to the source of the I. And when we do so, when we understand what Bhagavan is trying to do here, is asking us to remove all the relative expectations. And when we do that, we see that the stillness alone is. So when we don't answer the question, who am I, and recognize still the stillness alone is there, then we very much understand that the source, that silence which is there, is the answer, and it is the unchanging silence, or it is the ever present I am. It is the ever shining thing, wherein no matter how many innumerable thoughts might have come, circumstances might have come, many things we may have dealt, neither it has increased or decreased that pure I am. It has been untouched by any of this. And that is the self-luminous self, ever shining, ever present. And when we remain as that, and that is the signing of, that is what Bhagavan calls as the I, the real I of the I thought. So the I thought is a subject who wants to know some object. But when we go inquire who am I and go to the source of that even I thought, we see the subject, object, and the knowing all is absorbed in that pure presence. And any other kind of triputi of knowing or doing is again back to that individual only. And when we understand this at the core and remain silent, as Bhagavan says, be still and know that I am God. He says that. And that pure I am alone is unchanging. And that is what Bhagavan says, that being that is truly knowing the self. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path, which makes us abide in our true nature of I am here and now, which is not something that we need to acquire. All we need to do is let go all that which is non-self, and that is only done by attacking the root cause of the non-self, which is the I, by inquiring who am I and trying to get back to the source of the I. We are cutting, when we cut the root of the non-self, the whole tree falls off. We need not have to individually attack anything. If we attack the root, Bhagavan says, that is enough, because the whole tree falls off and the pure stillness as I am alone remains. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, for the next 20 minutes, no matter how many thoughts come, because it is in the realm of the triputis, to the one who wants to, who is aware. Therefore, we have to, whatever may be the nature of the thought, good, bad, ugly, even spiritual, we should diligently inquire to whom is this. Then we see the first and the primary division called I, to whom the subject, to whom the thought had appeared. We should further diligently inquire, who am I? And try to and go to the source of the I thought, or what do I refer as I within me. It is not an answer. Again, the answer would be in the realm of Tripudi. By inquiring who am I and trying to trace to the source of the I and getting back to the self, Bhagavan says by repeated practice, the mind will gain enough strength to remain at the source. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, let us do Atma Vichara the next 20 minutes. Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Ramana, over to Sharadaka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana, we have been meditating on self-inquiry, Bhagavan's answers to questions on self-inquiry, as well as, by that very immense grace, sat for the practice of self-inquiry itself. And in this part of the satsang, we are meditating on Bhagavan's answers to the questions of devotees as compiled by Ganapati Muni in Ramana Gita in 18 chapters. And we are meditating on the chapter 5, Signs of the Heart, Hridaya Vidya. In this chapter, there are no questions actually. All the verses consist of Bhagavan's suo motu explanation about the nature of the heart. And in the first part, the very beginning, Bhagavan says the heart is the source of all thoughts. And any description of the heart is only a concept, bhavana kriti varnanam. Having given us that warning, as it were, to understand that we should not convert Bhagavan's words into concepts, but rather we should try to get to the anubhava that is mentioned by Bhagavan. Having given us that warning, Bhagavan goes on to explain that the heart is a spiritual energy source within the body, and so long as one is identified with the body, this becomes the source, or so long as one continues to function within the parameters of the body, even without the identification with the body, so long as one continues to function within the parameters of the body, like Bhagavan, all the Jivan Muktas, they are functioning in relation to or completely centered in the spiritual energy source which Bhagavan calls the heart. And this Bhagavan explains is a little to the right of the center, and this is the source, not any other center, but this heart center alone is the center, says Bhagavan. The center is the heart, not the Anahata Chakra or any other center. And it is not a physical organ. It is the heart is not the blood pumping organ. That is only a part of the body. Having said this, then Bhagavan explained to us that from this spiritual energy source, the energy, the consciousness spreads to the mind center, which is the Sahasrara or the head, and from there it permeates throughout the body. And because it permeates throughout the body, what do? We think that the body itself is the self. We perceive a world apart from the body, and we think that this body is the self, and we believe that the mind center alone is supreme. Bhagavan went on to explain to us that when one functions from the mind center, one is actually bhavan brahmyati pamaraha. It is that such a person is actually wandering. He is lost somewhere. Or even earlier Bhagavan told us, samsari manujo bhavet. So he becomes a samsari He becomes concerned with the world instead of being concerned with the self. And the one who is abiding in the self, he is unconcerned about any of the bhavana. And such an absolute disassociation from all concepts can be of two kinds, Bhagavan explained to us. One, it could be nirvikalpa or it could be sahaja. Nirvikalpa is when there is no awareness of any other object or any object whatsoever. Sahaja is when, even though objects are perceived, the attention is fully abiding in the source. Having explained this, Bhagavan went on to explain to us, he goes on to tell us that the relationship between the mind and the heart is like the relationship between the sun and the moon. Just as the sun lights the world, the heart lights this entire bodily world. Andam vapushi nisheshaha nishesham hridaye vapuh tasmat andasya sarvasya hridayam rupa sambrahaha. Bhagavan said that this whole world is contained in the body and the body is contained in the heart. Or the whole world is contained in the mind and the mind is contained in the heart. Therefore, the entire story of creation, sustenance, destruction, every story that the mind creates is only katha parisamapyate. It finishes where? Ashesha hridaye tasmat katha parisamapyate. The entire story, all the stories that the mind creates end in the heart. They are sustained by the heart. The heart alone is the reality, as the sun is the reality. The sun is the source of light to the world. And Bhagavan says that to be in the mind, this was the last verse we had meditated on, to be centered in the mind is like living life in the night, in ignorance, in darkness. And what is so magnificent, what appears so magnificent in the night is the moon. So Bhagavan says, asannikarshe suryasya ratrau chandre yatha maha. We are unaware of the sunlight of the self, and therefore the moon appears to be very large, very prominent, very important. All the importance that we give to the mind, to the thoughts, to the process of thinking is because we function from the basis of ignorance, says Bhagavan, and because apashyam tejaso moolam, because we are not seeing the source, the light, which is the source. Apashyam tejaso moolam manasa cha prithak pashyan, and seeing everything as apart from ourselves, living in duality because we are perceiving things by the light of the moon. The light of the moon is a partial light. It is not a complete light as we saw. It is, because it is partial, it doesn't reveal the entire truth. It reveals only a part of the truth to us. And this obviously creates illusions. It is also the fact that even this partial truth is revealed by the mind only at times, because the mind itself waxes and wanes. It grows, it diminishes, it disappears altogether on the new moon day. So We cannot rely, really speaking, on the light of the moon to reveal the entire truth to us. However, that appears to be very magnificent to us because we are rooted in ignorance, says Bhagavan. So, this is to give us the impetus. Every time we give importance to any thought whatsoever, we can remember this verse of Bhagavan where he says, Ratrau Chandre Yatha Mahaha. This thought appears to be significant. This thought appears to be important. This thought appears to be meaningful only because I am functioning from the basis of ignorance. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of the source of that thought. Ignorance of the source of light of that thought, like the source of light of the moon. If, on the other hand, I would be rooted in the heart, how would it be, says Bhagavan here in the next verse? He says, Hridi sannihito jnani linam hridaya tejasi. If one remains in the presence of the heart, one is absorbed in the light of the heart, then how does one look at the mind? Ikshate manasam tejo diva bhana bivaindavam. One sees the light of the moon as one would see the light of the moon in daylight. When there is a full moon, it is there during the daytime also. The full moon is not absent. It can be seen even during daylight. Only in the waxing, in the waning period, one will see the moon less and less during the daytime. But in the waxing period, one can see the moon in the daytime. But when one sees that moon in the daytime, of what significance is that moon which we see in the daytime? It is there, that's all. Oh, that is the moon, we can say. That is the moon. It is like anything else in the sky. It's like not even like a cloud. It's not even as significant as a cloud. During the daytime, the moon, even clouds appear to be brighter. They can capture our attention. But the moon is absolutely insignificant. It pales into insignificance literally in the daytime. So Bhagavan says a jnani looks at the mind as if one would see the moon in daylight. So we all wonder what will happen to the mind when one abides in the self. So Bhagavan is giving the answer in this verse. What would happen to it is not that it would cease to exist, but it would lose its importance. The source, the effulgent source, would completely or swallow it up in its own effulgence, in every aspect of significance. So when we look at our thoughts, when we get carried away by the thought, instead of getting carried away by the thought, Bhagavan says, make the thought like the moon in daylight. How to make the thought like the moon in daylight? By turning and asking, for whom is this thought? In the beginning of this chapter, Bhagavan had said that the heart is the source of all thoughts. Then he said in the following verse, the I thought is the source of all thoughts and the heart is the source of the I thought. So when we look at any thought and we recognize this is not a source of light, this is not independently capable of giving anything to us, not experience, not knowledge, not happiness, not any fruit of our action. The thought is actually jada. Bhagavan has told us again in Upadesha Saram, Vigraha, Indriya, Prana, Dhi. Dhi is also Tat Jadam. It is Jada. It is not its source of light. It is Jada. It doesn't have its own consciousness. The consciousness comes to it, as Bhagavan has explained again, when the energy of consciousness rises from the heart and reaches the Sahasrara, the mind center, then the thoughts appear to be effulgent, they appear to have an energy, they appear to have a power to make us act, to make us understand. But when we turn back to the heart, with every thought, we must turn back to the heart, asking ourselves, what is the source of this thought? What is the source of this light? It seems to be some light. It seems to be having some power. This thought seems to be having some energy. It appears as if it could lead me to some fruit, give me some happiness. But what is its real source? When we ask ourselves that, we will find I am the source of the thought, because this thought is for me. And this I thought again is linked only to the heart. That's why Bhagavan says in every thought, get back to the source of effulgence, get back to the sunlight, which is the heart, instead of wandering in the darkness, imagining that there is lot of light coming from the moonlight, which is the mind. And Bhagavan further indicates that there are the word, even in the Sanskrit language, prajnanasya pravetaro vachyam artham mano viduhu. Some people say that prajnana, consciousness, is the meaning of mind. But the one who really knows artham to lakshyam, hridayam. Hridayana paraha. But the real meaning is heart. Consciousness is only in the heart. It is not in the mind. Again, Bhagavan reiterates this truth to us, and he goes on to say that we may experience the heart unconsciously in laya, but the merger should be conscious. That alone will lead to sahaja. It will lead to nirvikalpa and it will lead to sahaja. So Bhagavan in these verses is emphasizing again and again the supremacy, the glory of the heart center, in order to make us recognize the insignificance of the mind, the meaninglessness of pursuit of any thought whatsoever. By His grace, when He is mentioning this, when He is explaining this, that grace itself will ensure not only the understanding of these verses, but by turning to that grace, the very experience of these verses as well. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ram.
Apara Satchit Sukhavarirashi Yasyornimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Chintayami Chinta
Namo Ramana. Really, thank you.